Of this station or any of the show's sponsors.
Welcome back to Financial Issues. I'm Dan Celia. It's great to be here. 866-300-9298. The markets, of course, yesterday, all in positive territory. The Dow was up 108, I think, yesterday. It's up about 77. So things just keep going up. There's a lot of people getting very, very excited, trying to get into the markets as quick as they possibly can because this is going to be another year like last year. So everybody thinks they're jumping in. They were out last year. They're tired of being out. They're sick of the money they're making in money markets. They need to get in the market. And all of these folks, the ones that can least afford to get hurt by the downtick, are the ones that are going to get hurt the most. And, you know, Alan Greenspan, in my opinion, can probably be considered responsible for all the senior citizens that are going to lose. We're going to lose, millions, hundreds of millions of dollars lost by senior citizens in the next downturn. And I can blame it on Alan Greenspan. I don't even have to blame it on Bernanke. I can blame it on Alan Greenspan. I can go all the way back to Alan and his cheap interest monetary policies to intentionally keep interest rates low on CDs, forcing those on fixed incomes, depending on a little bit of income from their CDs, forcing them to get into the markets. Thereby, we see an accelerated market with all this new money coming in because they just have to get a few more percent because of the cheap, irrational, cheap money policies that we continue to this day. And they're the ones that are going to be jumping in on these markets, and they're the ones that are going to get hurt because soon as the downtick happens, soon as the market goes down, they're the first ones out. Too. So there's not going to be any waiting for it to come back up. They're going to be out. So huge issue. Drives me crazy. Another reason why to read this article that I wrote that's going to be in my newsletter today. You can go to financialissues.org if you want to get that newsletter. It's an email newsletter. It doesn't cost anything. I don't ask you for a bunch of information. I'm not going to get your phone number and your address and all that stuff. All I need is your email address, and we'll send it to you. We only use the newsletter to send you a newsletter. And it comes out every Friday. So you can check that out at financialissues.org. 866-300-9298. Let me go to, who's on deck? Let me go to Dean in Texas. Hey, Dean.
Good morning, Dan. Thank
Good
you
morning.
for taking my call.
Sure.
I was listening on a recent program. You were talking with a caller about AT&T as a stock,
Mm-hmm.
and if I remember right, you had said that you didn't keep up with it, or you stopped following it. It was AT&T as a company, they did not follow biblical principles.
Correct.
My wife and I, we don't own AT&T in stock, but we use them as a provider, and I was just wondering if you could tell me what your specific concerns were with AT&T.
Well, they support abortion, number one. I don't have to go too much further than that. But that would be my biggest concern. All the stocks that I talk about are the stocks on my list are what I call biblically responsible. They're not engaging. They're not throwing themselves into the culture war. They're not supporting those things that would be offensive to God. And so if they're involved in pornography, it's another issue for AT&T. They're involved in pornography. They're involved in abortion. They're involved in the support of redefinition of marriage, all those kinds of things. And there are many companies out there that are, and they don't make my list. So from a stock standpoint, from an ownership of that company, because that's what stock is. When you own a share of stock, even if it's one share, you are an owner of that company. You have ownership in that company. So I don't think that we ought to be putting God's money into the ownership of the very things that are offensive to God. So that's kind of how all that works. So I don't remember the call, obviously, but I do. You're right in what you said. I've told many callers that I wouldn't own AT&T stock. if they've asked that question. So hopefully that helps. Let me go to Nolan. Nolan calling us from Texas. Hey, Nolan.
Yes, sir. I heard that Comrade Obama was talking the other. I had heard that Comrade Obama was talking the other day about raising the inheritance tax to 45%.
Yes.
And what I was wondering is, I have a family farm that I'm going to leave to my kids and grandkids, and if I put them on as right of survivorship, would I get out of that tax of them having to pay it?
Here's what you need to do. You need to give them the ownership of it now, and how you do that, Nolan, is you need to try to put that into a trust, a living trust, a family trust, and you and your spouse are going to be trustees of the trust. Your children are going to be co-trustees of the trust. Okay, so the trust now, this asset, this farm, is no longer owned by you and your wife. You still have full control, of course, of what goes on, but it's no longer owned by you. It's owned by your name, Nolan, and your wife, such and such, family trust, dated, whatever. That's who owns it. The trust owns it. So, therefore, when you and your wife are both called home to be with the Lord, you might have something in that trust that is a triggering mechanism, it's called, that says, upon my death, I would like the trust dissolved. At that point, the trust would go to the ownership, the farm would go to the ownership of the co-trustees, of the other trustees of the trust. Now, nobody died. Nobody died in order for them to get it. That's the loophole. Nobody died. Now, your death was a triggering mechanism to disperse assets, but that's all it was. It could have been the death of your cat. It's irrelevant. But it's not because, it's not an inheritance. They didn't inherit it as a result of your death. The trust was just disbanded as a result of your death. So that would be the safest way to do that. And I know I have a lot of ranchers and farmers listening. If you have not done that, please do it. I know it's going to cost a little money. So, Nolan, it's going to cost you some money from a legal fee standpoint to establish the trust. Remember, when you do it, not that lawyers might not think like this. I owned a trust company for 22 years. I settled a whole lot of estates, probably a lot more than a lot of lawyers. Look, the thing is, your children can't be. They need to be trustees of the trust now, not successor trustees. I know what the law says about successor trustees, but they need to be trustees now, because I don't trust the government well enough to not change that rule either. So I would put it into the trust. Here's the problem. I don't know how big your farm is or your ranch, but I'll say this. One of the issues that this is a stumbling block for a lot of people, is that when you put it in the name of the trust, there's usually a transfer tax. That's something that's done on the local level by the state. So there's usually a transfer tax, and it's usually no more than 1% of the appraised tax, the tax appraised value of the property. So that's a stumbling block, because people say, I don't want to pay the tax. Well, it's 1%. Your chances are your children, if we maintain this ideology in Washington for any length of time, are going to lose it anyway, because they're going to have to sell at least half of it to get the tax money to keep the other half. So that's what you need to do.
I talked to my dad yesterday, and his ranch is a whole lot bigger than mine. And he's under the impression that it had to be into so many $1 million before it applied, before the inheritance tax applied. And I was telling him, I don't think so. I think they're going to nail everybody.
No. He's right about that, Nolan. He's right about that.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So there's a threshold. So here's what happens. every one of us right now have a federal tax credit. And between you married, Nolan?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so between you and your wife, it's about $6 million. So if your assets don't total up if they total up to $5 million, you're okay. Now, here's the issue, though. You still have to have a will in such a way that preserves your spouse's tax credit for the estate. So I'm trying to, it's a little complicated, but so if you die, your tax credit dies too. It's gone. Okay. So now you thought you were protected, but now it's only your wife's tax credit because everything's going to go to her with no estate tax or anything like that too. Everything's going to just automatically be hers. And then there's so what's going to happen is when she dies, that federal tax credit now is cut in half because you're gone. It's only going to be half of it, and it might not qualify. But there's a way in the will to preserve and actually pass along your federal tax credit to your estate. So that now, when your wife is called home to be with the Lord, you get both of your tax credits, the estate does, in order to try to preserve as much tax credit. So now, let's just say it's $10 million by then. So if your ranch is worth $11 million, they would only have to pay tax on $1 million. Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. So hopefully,
thank you very much for what you. Thanks a lot for what you do, and God bless you for your information.
Thank you, Nolan. I appreciate that, and I'm very, very passionate about that topic because I love farmers. They're the heartbeat of America, and ranchers, and I get so concerned because I know that there are third generation farmers that are going to lose everything, which is so sad. That are going to lose the whole deal because they just didn't plan properly. Mitt Romney had it right. He said that the death tax should be illegal. There shouldn't be any inheritance tax. His first order of business, had he been president, was going to be to do away with it. That's the way it ought to be. But we've got a mentality in Washington that is all about tax revenues. It's not about anything else. Forget about a thriving economy. It's about tax revenues because tax revenues are going to allow them to continue to spend and gain more power and more social control. So that's what it's about. 866-300-9298. Let me go to Greg. Greg calling us from Iowa. Hey, Greg.
Good morning, Dan. Thanks for your program.
Sure thing.
I'm a retired school teacher, so I've got some retirement income from that. I've got Social Security. I've got some money in an IRA, put some into mutual funds. The nuttiness of the government, I just heard on your commercial on an agreement that the basic leaders, if you use the term loosely, are weasels and on and on. Mm-hmm. My question for you, I guess I want your just a broad opinion. I'm looking way down the road prophetically. I just believe our country is, we're going to implode.
Yeah.
And let's just say that.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking for something to put money in that's real, not paper assets like stocks and so forth.
Right.
So my question is, using a broad brush, give me some idea of something to put some money into besides stocks, in your opinion.
Well, it would be real estate, obviously, land, preferably agricultural land. Agricultural land is probably some of the best assets you could put your money into. So certainly land is going to be part of that. The other thing that you could use as in lieu of that, in lieu of stocks, is commodities. Commodities such as wheat, corn, cattle, those kinds of things. You can put gold and silver in there if you'd like. They will go up when this coming collapse happens in value. but I know you'll get rid of your wheat. I don't know that you'll get rid of your gold very easily because it's going to be, it's not going to have any value to anybody other than the value in and of itself. So I'm right up against this break, Greg. I'm sorry to let you go, but when I come back, I promise you I'll continue to elaborate on that right after this break. You're listening to Dan Celia, Financial Issues. We're trying to talk about the economy, helping you be the best steward you can be. And yes, we talk a little bit about politics.